Hello and welcome to Robotic Surgery Insights. I'm excited to be joined today by George Warman, Director of Automation R&D at Vantedge Medical. Thank you for joining me today, George.
Thank you, Katie. I'm glad to be here.
So if you could please start by telling us a little bit about yourself and Vantedge Medical.
Certainly. So, as Director of Automation, we are involved in across the site integration for manufacturing the medical devices to serve our customers, specifically with metal fabrication. So, our role is to investigate and implement automation that supports the stringent quality and on-time delivery requirements for all of our customers. So with that, the team then develops and implements each one of the systems and works with our internal customers to roll those out to enhance manufacturing for our MedTech companies.
So a lot of MedTech manufacturers have invested in automation, but not all of those systems are delivering the expected value. In your experience, where does automation most often fall short in medical device manufacturing?
So I think it starts from the concept of the scope itself. So a lot of times manufacturers will have this vision in mind for what their process could be as we automate. And with that, the scope or the deliverables for those automation projects are not entirely taken to the granular level that it needs to be able to realize the actual benefits from that. So from the very onset beginning, the approach would be to involve multiple groups, quality, production planning, engineering, and especially tech support, so that we have everyone's input from the operator level up of what the expectation is and where the real goals lie within that development of that project. That enables the supplier of automation to be able to deliver for each one of those groups and be able to develop that handoff signature to each one of those and be able to deliver everything needed. Another piece to this is at the very end of it, what happens is we never get closure to those projects. So as we develop these programs and these systems that are implemented across manufacturing, a lot of times what happens is we move from one to the other. So in the case of trying to improve that ability, we can have a project closeout, which a lot of times gets missed, and we can then close the gaps on where we've done well and where we've missed the mark potentially to have a continuous improvement. So revisiting the scope of the job, monitoring it, recalibrating and adjusting as the needs and demands change for our customers. It allows us that flexibility to be able to do that.
Great. And once you identify those gaps, what does your team do to correct course and make the next automation project stronger?
One area that I've always tried to build the team towards is from a book that became very familiar to me called Flawless Execution. So the premise of that book is that they were the acrobatic Blue Angels, actually, if we're familiar with that team of highly skilled pilots that take our fighter jets and do acrobatic air shows. And what they do is they evaluate at the end of every one of these shows, which are, if anybody's familiar with that, it's very high speed, very thrill seeking type of aircraft that are within inches of each other as they do their show. So we're talking about life or death in the events that they do. They take this premise and they build it to where they evaluate everything that went through that entire show. So now they can look at what went well, what didn't go well, and what they can do to improve that at each step of the stage. So with that, I've taken that foundational approach and say at the end or even during the process of what we're doing, let's step back and see how we're doing based on what we propose to be there, as opposed to where we are, because we all run into roadblocks potentially when we're attempting to do different things along our project process, right? So with that, we're able to step back, clearly assess where we are, where we thought we were going to be, and how we can make adjustments to that. So that not only does that help us in the immediate as we're delivering these projects to our customers, our internal customers, and ultimately our final customer in the MedTech world, but we're also able at the very end to be able to look back upon that project and say, this is what we did really well. This is where maybe we need to make improvements the next time, whatever those categories may be. And it helps the entire team learn. So it's not just the project team, it's the entire automation team that's brought in there so that we all get where the lessons are learned and what we can do to improve across the whole team.
Okay, so automation is often talked about in terms of machines and throughput, but equipment is only one part of the equation. In a medtech environment where precision, quality, and compliance are critical, what else has to be in place for automation to succeed?
That's a great question, Katie. So, one of the key elements to this is understanding the process from the people viewpoint. So, interviewing or intermingling with where we start at the operator level and then carry that through to each one of the departments that become intertwined with that process. So, of course, quality, manufacturing, production planning, all of those have an integral part to the overall development and throughput of that process itself and ultimately that part. So that's one aspect. The second aspect, as you're doing the interviewing and investigating with that, is understanding that process and understanding it from the viewpoint of where does the part start? What is the piece that is wanted to be able to be automated through that, and what it takes to fabricate or machine that part? And then ultimately, what is the outcome from that? And that leads to the third important factor within that is the system itself. So again, looking at what precedes, what part of that process is within this cell, and then how does it output to the next process? Because ultimately what should be looked at is the overall throughput from the beginning raw material to the end product that's being packaged for our MedTech customer. So with that, what we have done internally is we implement our own site acceptance and factory acceptance test that enables us to look at all aspects and create this matrix that enables us to capture any and all possibilities that we can process through of what could happen during that process. So ultimately, we can deliver a system that addresses any of the circumstances that may happen during a process. Because even though we like to think that all of our processes are perfect, we know that machines have problems. We know that occasionally operators, miss something within that part. So once we're able to develop that matrix and complete that sign off, and eventually that helps us lead to a validation with our MedTech customer, then we feel like we've been able to satisfy the deliverables for that entire system.
So many medtech manufacturers are collecting more data than ever, but not always using it effectively. What does good data utilization look like on the shop floor, especially when teams are trying to improve quality, consistency, and performance?
So, one of the big questions that comes up when we're trying to collect data is what is the type of data that is extremely useful and purposeful for what we're trying to gain out of it? So, in other words, again, we've got several groups within our manufacturing facilities that look at data and try to create actionable items based off of data, right? So you've got a different viewpoint for what the data looks like, how to utilize it on that end. So capturing what that looks like from integrating into a machine and bringing that forward to those people is a key to what the data is. Then within that data, you want to be able to, again, understand where the deficiencies are in that process. And then each one of the groups can formulate a plan to be able to create a solution to solve that. Because ultimately, what we're trying to do is optimize our equipment, again, to deliver high quality, on time deliveries at the best price available and possible for our customers. That enables us to build that collaboration bridge between us and our customers so that we can gain more and more confidence with them. So with that data, you're able to create reports and be able to make decisions based off real-time data and how it's being leveraged within the facility to be able to accomplish those goals for our customers.
So, how do you evaluate whether automation is the right investment for a specific MedTech process, product, or production environment?
There's a couple different factors that is taken into consideration when we're looking at an automation process. So the first thing that always lends itself to a easier answer is there is a large volume that's forecast, whether there's a high mix, low volume, or high volume, low mix. So that enables us to be able to understand the utilization of that machinery and how well that we're going to be able to automate that. The evolution of that product is also an important factor. Is it something that has just come out of what we call our first step initiative, which enables us to work hand in hand with our customers' engineering teams to help them in their development process to be able to get to that end product? So there's a lot of iterations and almost design on the fly for improvement that we're working with our customers at that first level. So what's an advantage is being able to integrate the automation team in at that level so that we can develop our strategy for once we know that that product is going to be required because of the volumes and the on-time deliveries to be able to get it to that state. So that enables us to evaluate that and move forward easily once we go from potentially a manual process to a more automated process.
Final question. As medtech products become more complex and manufacturers face increasing pressure to scale efficiency, where do you think automation is headed next, and what should teams be preparing for now?
That's a great question. So what we've introduced into our facilities and are broadening that scope across all sites is what's referred to as Industry 4.0. So again, the core foundation for this is where's this data coming from and what does that data look like? So Industry 4.0 takes it to a level where you've not only networked all of your processes and all of your machines in, but you now have the tools and the reporting to be able to, again, make these actionable solutions to be able to optimize that equipment. Optimizing it is like the fourth step in that maturity level, where now we go into the intelligent portion of that cycle where your machines become autonomous. There's automatic offsets that are made. There's decision making at the machine level based on these actionable items and what this data is giving us. So there's a couple advantages to this. There's an opportunity to create what we call a digital twin. So a digital twin allows us to take our existing process and put it into a virtual world and be able to move that around, much like someone might think of as a video game, and be able to optimize that process of exactly what we're doing in a virtual world and then be able to turn around and implement that in the real world. But an important fact of that is, and this is where I believe the industry is leading of what they're now calling Industry 5.0 is, we have to bring the human factor back into it. We have to understand what the tribal knowledge is that may exist on the floor and what the operator or the maintenance personnel have done all these years to make the process work, but no one's really understood that that's become like a step in the process. So there may be gaps that are occurring that don't necessarily show up in the data that keeps us from getting that ultimate intelligent, automated, potentially autonomous system. So I believe that once we've evolved the operator and the maintenance people back into this loop to be able to help us finish off understanding the process and what we do, I believe that that's ultimately the answer.
Right, and thank you very much for your time today, George. It's been great speaking with you.
Thank you, Katie. I appreciate having the opportunity to talk about this.